I was so excited about my June TBR, but I only ended up reading 5 books this month, so what went wrong? Hi, I'm Olivia. This is AV Club, where I'm usually talking horror books, lit fic, otherwise weird books, whatever I want to talk about. And today I want to talk about the somehow 5 books that I read in June. I had plans for Pride Month reading, I had plans for Summer Ween reading, and yeah, the books ended up kind of being accidents what I ended up finishing. And don't get me wrong, I know 5 books is still a lot to some people, but I'm usually averaging above 10 books a month, usually around 13, 14. So I'm going to talk through my books like usual and then at the end come up with some ideas about what happened. And as usual, I'll be going from my least favorite of the month all the way to my favorite, which this month was a high 4 stars. But my lowest of the month was only a 3 star. There was nothing that really flopped except, I guess, the mini DNFs of the month. But in 5th place is Like, Follow, Die by Ashley Kalagian Blunt. I talked a little bit about it in my recent book haul, but it is supposedly like a Australian response to the TV show Adolescence, which was set in Britain. Very popular, very well regarded, but about a young boy who becomes radicalized online into men's rights activist spaces or into other right wing spaces. And this book opens with a mom being greeted at the front door by a police detective who wants to talk about her son. We don't know why yet, but she knows why he's there. Her son Ben has had a hard time since switching schools. He is the poorest person in these rich eastern suburbs, Sydney private schools. His mom, Corinne, is an executive. She was making good money. However, things have changed. She's a single mother, and she's really doing what she can to do the best by her son as possible, which, as you know, isn't always perfection. And so she makes mistakes along the way, thinking that she's doing the best she can for her son, trying to put him in the best possible schools, even though he also feels kind of awkward in those schools because he is so much less economically advantaged than the other kids. But we hear a lot from her son, Ben. He's not present in the current day storyline that we're getting with the detective and the mom. He is represented in the story through his diary entries, which at the beginning is a physical diary, and he's just, talking about school, about his friends at school. Seems like a very sweet boy. But then over time, he gets onto the internet and has an online journal, and you see his descent into these right wing spaces and how some things like his interactions with kids at school or with his attempts at getting a first girlfriend, how all these things sculpt the person that he becomes. So we have the detective and mom current timeline. Then we have Ben's journals, which follow many years. And then the third timeline we have is a couple of days prior to this, the detective who has come to the door. It is about him trying to figure out this murder case. So it's kind of a psychological thriller, but mostly I think a crime thriller, a current day Australian Sydney crime thriller. It was nice to read a thriller horror from a different perspective in Australia. You would think that a lot of the books would be set in Sydney, and I guess some are, but the horror that I've read or the thrillers that I've read have all been set in rural regional environments. So it was a nice change of pace to read something set in Sydney. I will say, like, I know that this cover is doing a great disservice to this book. It just is not really the vibes of what's going on in this book. Not that the thriller elements really astounded me in any way. It's not like I was gasping throughout the book at all the twists and turns. Like, it kind of goes in the ways that you would expect it to. I had, I guess, some issues with how Ben's journals were written. Like, I was just not buying that these were being written by a teenage boy. And I think there's a lot more insidious things going on online than what has happened to this boy, where it's almost like he is directly looking for these things, whereas in real life, the algorithms are sending boys down these paths at alarming rates, and it was never their idea in the first place. So I felt like it could be a lot more nuanced, but gosh, this is just like one of the worst covers I have scene. I don't know. Like it is just looks so generic, and I think the story's a lot better than the cover would lead you to believe. Like it is not about, I don't know. It looks like it's almost like a nonfiction, airport nonfiction about social media, like Faye likes and dislikes, that doesn't factor into the story at all. Like and following, like it really isn't about social media. It is about this like one boy's experience getting into extremist areas online, but it's never about social media really. He does become obsessed with a YouTuber, right wing female YouTuber, who is validating all of his concerns about modern women, but it's never like a popularity contest like liking and following die. Like it's just, it sounds so cheesy, and it's not really a cheesy book at all. So I'm not sure what happened with the direction there. But if you are interested in a book like this, something that is like an Australian version of adolescence, then maybe you would enjoy this. My next book was False Prophet by Afsheen Farhadi. This was a book that I got through Netgalley and just came out this week. I think July 7th was its official release date. But this is a story about a man who is an actor. He's had kind of some missteps in his career, and so he decides that he wants to write a book about his mother and about his mother's involvement in the Jonestown cult, that she was from Guyana and was recruited into the Jonestown cult, and a ghostwriter is hired in order to tell his story because his agent thinks it's a great idea. It immediately gets greenlit. The only issue is that it never happened. His mom wasn't involved in the cult at all, and he runs into a cousin in Los Angeles at a book event, and he's like, "Hey, I know the story about our family isn't true, and my dad's really mad." And so our main character is conflicted about what to do because he feels like he's too far in telling this story. Why does he even want to tell the story? Uh, is if he just goes ahead against his morals and against his family's desires, is he going to get caught out anyway in having lied about all this? One of the comp titles was Yellowface, which would be apt if it really felt like there were any consequences for him doing this at any point in the book. But yeah, there's not really ever the threat that he's getting caught out, and it's not so much about those thriller elements. It is split between him doing this in the present day mixed with getting to read the book that is being written, that's being ghost written. And one of my favorite things is that it does something that I love in a book that has a book inside a book, where it's like they stumble upon the next pages and then you read that part in the book. I think it's done in like If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler, or even like a series of unfortunate events where it's like the characters find the book or pages and then you get to read it. I don't know. That's like such a niche thing, but I did enjoy that. However, knowing from the beginning that his mom's story is fake, it's kind of hard to really get invested in the narrative about his mom getting involved in this cult, because you know that it wasn't real and that no matter what is being told in the story, it doesn't really have weight as having stakes because it's not real. Which, I mean, I guess you could say about any book is it's not real, but it's like, what could happen to his mom in this story? What could make this story so desirable to read? And it does go full circle to talk about why we need to have excitement in some stories in order for them to be meaningful or to care about them. Why does he need his mom to have had an exciting life, and so why would we need this to be an exciting book? I guess there's some meta commentary there, but I don't think that the strength of the meta commentary makes it having been worthwhile for half of the book to be about this fake narrative that doesn't really go anywhere, because yeah, he doesn't have any facts about the Jonestown cult or anything like that. Like it's geared to be so much more about a cult when it's never actually present. That even in this fake narrative, there's never really any culty stuff. I think if you are picking this up hoping it's a really culty book, that you love culty books, I don't think that itch will be scratched by this one. However, I did enjoy it. It was just kind of a middle of the road book for me that it's hard to kind of recommend, even though at the end of it I was like, that was a good story. Um, it wasn't shocking or revelatory in any way, but it was just like a solid story. And sometimes I don't mind that being the experience with a novel every now and then, but it does make it hard to figure out who to recommend it to because it's just okay for me. Next is Hazelthorn by C.G. Drews. I had started reading Don't Let the Forest In. I believe that's what it's called. I had checked that out from the library and started reading it. And then I needed an audiobook to read, and I was enjoying Don't Let the Forest In. So I was like, I'll check out Hazelthorn. And I read all of Hazelthorn before ever finishing the first book by her that I was reading. So yeah, this is an Australian author too, which I don't think everyone knows. The Don't Let the Forest In has an Australian main character. Hazelthorn, from my recollection, I don't think it was specified where it was or the nationalities. It feels just gothic. It feels like it could be a gothic Australian house. It feels like it could be a gothic British house. It kind of has that anywhere capability to it. Like Don't Let the Forest In, Hazelthorn is technically a young adult novel. This one felt less young adult to me than the other one because it's not set at a school or anything like that. It felt like they could really be actual young adults, like in their 20s, except for one of the boys is kind of like a ward of the grandfather figure. So there's two boys. They have spent a lot of their youth together, but there is animosity there. One of them apparently tried to kill the other one the last time they saw each other, but then they're both there, and the one's grandfather who owns the house dies, and the other boy is just a ward of the grandfather. Either earlier this year or last year, I read a YA sapphic horror that has almost this exact same setting and was also supposed to be very planty. Like the cover is just so gorgeous and is so planty and beautiful. And what I wanted from that book, which I didn't find to be that planty, this one has in spades. I do think that it is so gorgeous and lush, and it just feels like there's vines and growths all over it. It really nails the greenhouse feel, the organicness, the moss, the soil. It really feels planty in a way that the other one didn't, which I can't even remember the name of. However, Hazelthorn was good. Again, there was no twist that I feel like my enjoyment hinged upon. It was just so rich with the gothic atmosphere, and I didn't feel like it had any YA elements that were unappealing to me as someone who doesn't usually read YA. But I just was like in the mood for something, and like it's kind of nice to. I was listening to this on audiobook mostly while I was playing Pokemon Pocopia. We got a Switch 2, and I put so many hours into this game, and I was just listening to the audiobook and the next audiobook while playing, and I it was nice to listen to something that was like a little bit not simpler in language, because I do feel like she's a very expressive author, that it's very lush and very vibey. If you want a vibe, then I think she writes a vibe and really sticks to it in a way that it's not just superficial, like it is written into the language and is really gonna bash you over the head with whatever it wants you to get from it. And Don't Let the Forest In, it was plants too, but all of the language would really contribute to that feeling that it would be talking about things growing or strangling vines as metaphors too. Like it was just very consistent with it. So I think if you want something really um not nuanced, but something more subtle, like it's not subtle at all, but I was really in the mood for that. I did not mind its lack of subtlety at all. I really enjoyed it. And then because I was so on the gothic vibe, wanting to listen to these audiobooks while playing Pocopia, I read The Possession of Alba Díaz by Isabel Cañas. I read The Hacienda either earlier this year or last year, and I got approved for an arc of House of Gardenias, which is coming out on September 29th and is her first YA horror. So I wanted to read more from her because the Hacienda was kind of like a 3-star for me, but I've heard such good things about Possession of Baba Diaz that I thought if I love one, this is probably going to be it. And I did love this book. It is just so historically gothic and rich. Like, I just love the historical Mexico Gothic vibes, and the possession story was done so well too. Maybe the best possession book that I've read. I thought it was just like such a beautiful love story too. It was so romantic. Some of the more novel Gothic elements of this were a mine. The love interest has come home because his father has died and he's supposed to inherit this mine, but turns out he has a sister. Is she going to inherit it instead? There was just such a cast of characters. Um, some evil, but some really nuanced characters that everyone had different motivations of why they were doing things, and it was committed to telling like a very well-rounded story that wasn't so much just like, okay, this is a love story and this possession is going to be a metaphor for this. It really felt like she took her time making this real working world, and I just loved all of the character interactions, all of the strains of relationships, all of the trust. The idea of mercury poisoning being one of the contributing factors to the horror of the book, just something I've never read before, and it just got me so excited for reading more from her. I definitely recommend this if you like a gothic story. I think, if you like a historical gothic story and you're not usually reading contemporary horror, if you loved Rebecca or any, classic gothic literature, I recommend this in tandem with those. I just loved it, and I think it'll stand the test of time. It feels like it can go the distance. And then my best book of the month was The Caretaker by Marcus Kliewer. I was so excited to read this because I loved We Used to Live Here, and I know that one had mixed reviews, and maybe this one has mixed reviews too, but I just loved this book too. The Caretaker is about a young woman who is struggling to get by and finds a job being a caretaker for this old man at this cabin. She goes there. Turns out he actually died, and his widow needs to go away for a while, but someone has to be there to follow the rites, to do all of the rituals about the house that her husband thought would keep it safe for them. And not everything's going to make sense, but she doesn't necessarily believe that anything bad's going to happen if they don't follow the rites, but she just wants to follow her husband's wishes, and so she needs this girl to do these things. And it's things like lights will come on in the middle of the night, you need to turn them off, or you need to keep them on, or if a light is on for more than 5 minutes, a bad thing will happen. If you see a rabbit and you don't chase it, something bad will happen. I don't remember all the specific rights, but it was all these specific rules about stuff that was happening in the house, and if you didn't do that, something terrible was going to happen, but it would just be like one more chance. And it was like, okay, but if you don't do this, something really bad is going to happen. And so it kept just building on that feeling that something horrible was going to happen if she didn't follow things correctly. I will say she never did anything correctly, so it was just kind of going on until the next level over and over again. But it was about all of these compulsions that she both, by doing these rites, it was this obsessive compulsive need to do things in a certain way, or something bad was going to happen, something catastrophic was going to happen. But she also already had that personality where if she didn't do things in a certain way, that she had this not on the page diagnosed OCD, but just generally had these anxieties. And this book was very effective for me, both um, just as a horror novel overall, but it specifically affected me just since I had the break in here. I've had these anxieties, and for a while, kind of compulsions about checking things in the house just because it would briefly satisfy the need to feel like I was safe. But as you might know, if you feed those compulsions, it just gets worse because it kind of validates your need to do those things. And just the idea of like home invasions is written into parts of this book, and it just really hit home for me in a lot of ways. So it was effective in being actually kind of scary too. Which doesn't really happen often, but whenever I get scared in a book, it's almost always a home invasion thing because it was probably my biggest fear before it even happened to me. So definitely recommend this one if you like that kind of story. Even though it makes me kind of anxious, it also is a little bit cathartic. As far as my goals, I read one physical book this month, zero nonfiction, and two Aussie books. So didn't do great on my goals, but I only read 5 books. So why did I only read 5 books this month? I did DNF both on purpose and accidentally a ton of books this month. But yeah, I was feeling quite depressed and I was not enjoying anything for a week or two. I couldn't read books, couldn't watch movies, couldn't do anything, just nothing sounded good ever. So that's really the big reason why a lot didn't get read this month. And I'm okay with that. I always set these TBRs and they're always I wouldn't say aspirational in number, but kind of aspirational in that I know some of the books just won't get read, some will get DNF'd, and I don't hold myself to it in a major way. And so that's all right. I can't remember if a single one of these books was on my June TBR. I did start most of the books that were on my June TBR and it just didn't happen. And I'm trying to just like have some grace with myself and just keep it moving because I do want to read those books eventually, but just because it didn't happen in June does not mean it won't happen at some point. But thank you so much for listening to me today. Chat with me down in the comments what you read in June, if you can relate to any of this, and what you're reading now. But I will talk to you again soon. Talk to you later. Bye.